Major breaking news. The United States Supreme Court has ruled against the deep state and in favor of Donald Trump yet again in the case involving Rebecca Slaughter, who wants to remain as Chuck Schumer's de facto appointee to the Federal Trade Commission. She's not going to be allowed to do so as of now. We're going to break it down. Big win for the Constitution, for Donald Trump, and a big loss for the deep state. Let's talk about it when we come right back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. All right, folks, as you know, one of the critical four boxes of American liberty, for which this channel is named after, is the ballot box. The ballot box is, we have the right to vote. But what are we voting for? Well, guess what? We get to vote for our elected representatives. And those elected representatives get to make decisions on our behalf. And if we don't like it, we get to fire them by unelecting them. Well, this apparently has been lost since 1935 on the deep state. You see, since then, thanks to Supreme Court precedent by FDR Supreme Court, there are certain instances where organizations, or I should really say government agencies, have been functioning as a fourth branch of government. Well, that appears to be no more because of today's Supreme Court decision in Donald J. Trump versus Rebecca Kelly Slaughter. You see, Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, who used to be close friends and a worker of Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, right, the big Democrat out of New York. So Rebecca Slaughter got appointed to sit as a Democrat on the Federal Trade Commission. Obviously buddies with the Democrats, big-time Democrat. But here's the thing, folks. The Federal Trade Commission functions within what? The executive branch. And who's in charge of the executive branch, according to not Mark Smith, not the Four Boxes Diner, but the United States Constitution? Well, the United States Constitution says that the powers, the authority of the entire executive branch, including all those administrative agencies overseen by unelected bureaucrats, the deep state, they all have to answer to a single person. That would be the president. All of the powers in Article 2 of the United States Constitution, which creates the executive branch, are vested in the president, one guy. And that is exactly what the Supreme Court just indicated today in this case of Donald Trump versus Rebecca Slaughter. And why do I say this? You see, Rebecca Slaughter was just fired by Donald Trump from her position as a commissioner on the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. She argued that she could not be fired. Why? Because there's a federal statute enacted by Congress in the 1930s during the New Deal era, the start of the deep state, that said that commissioners on the FTC, on the Federal Trade Commission, could not be fired by the president unless he had a good reason or a for-cause reason for doing so. And that was defined as basically misbehavior, malpractice, malfeasance, as you are working as a commissioner on the FTC. And the Supreme Court back in the 1930s says this was okay. Even though this is a congressional statute enacted by Congress, and somehow that statute somehow arguably, according to the deep state lawyers, arguably could override the constitutional text of Article 2 that says that all the powers of the executive branch shall be vested in the President of the United States. But you know from this channel that a statute is below the U.S. Constitution in terms of our hierarchy of supreme laws. The Constitution is the top law. Federal statutes are below the Constitution. If there's a conflict between a statute and the text of the Constitution wins. Every time. Just as a reminder, the U.S. Constitution creates three branches of government. Article 1 creates the legislative branch, the Congress. Article 2 creates the presidency, the executive branch. And Article 3 creates the judiciary and the Supreme Court, the courts. Those are the three branches of government. But the FTC had been set up where you had Republicans and Democrats both got to sit on the commission, even though it was an executive branch agency overseen by the executive, also known today in 2025 as President Donald Trump. So anyway, Rebecca Slaughter brought a lawsuit claiming that Donald Trump could not fire her because she had a congressional statutory right to that job on the FTC unless she did something that justified being fired for cause, i.e. she misbehaved, engaged in malfeasance or negligence or whatever as part of her job as a commissioner of the FTC. Well, Donald Trump came in and fired her and said, no can do. No can do. You work for me. I am the boss. I am the president of the United States. That means under Article 2 of the Constitution, all the powers of the executive branch as created by Article 2 of the United States Constitution mean I am the boss. I am El Jefe. Congress cannot stop me from firing your butt and kicking you out the door because I am the president. And Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution trumps any congressional statute enacted in the 1930s that says otherwise, because the Constitution trumps the statute. Well, the lower courts in D.C., of course, because that's where Rebecca Slaughter sued, as well she should, good lawyering. She sued in the district courts in the District of Columbia, the heart of the deep state, the heart of the deep state on a swamp. And then, of course, it goes up to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which says that indeed Donald Trump could not fire Rebecca Slaughter because he did not find, and there was no basis to fire her. There was no good cause for firing her. There was no for-cause reason to fire her. And therefore, the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, right there in the heart of the deep state in Washington, D.C., that cesspool, they said that Donald Trump had to reinstate her to her job. Well, Donald Trump sought an emergency stay to the United States Supreme Court, and today I'm happy to report that Chief Justice John Roberts, that's right, none other than Chief Justice John Roberts has just entered an order staying, which means to pause, to freeze, whatever you want to call it, the lower court's order reinstating Rebecca Slaughter to her position, and John Roberts just says, stop. Stop. He put up his hand and yelled, halt, to the lower court decision that said that Rebecca Slaughter got to be reinstated or had to be reinstated to her job on the FTC by Donald Trump. Now, this is very good news, and I'll tell you why it's very good news. This is a sign, my friends, that a very important precedent, a wrongly decided historical precedent by the U.S. Supreme Court from the 1930s called Humphrey's Executor, is about to be overturned, it looks like. Now, Humphrey's Executor was a decision by the Supreme Court during the New Deal era when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was coming in and trying to usurp the powers of the people and give those powers from we the people, to give the ballot box powers from, take away the powers of the ballot box from we the people and give it to a large group of unelected bureaucrats, the start of the deep state. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not want people voting about this. So what he did was he started the process of creating this massive bureaucracy of government largesse and government bureaucrats, supposed experts of all these different agencies, all these alphabet soup agencies he created. And as part of that, there's a Supreme Court precedent called Humphrey's Executor. We don't need to get into the facts of it, but the bottom line holding of Humphrey's Executor by the FDR-run U.S. Supreme Court said that the President of the United States lacked the authority to fire commissioners on these kinds of boards like the FTC, on these kinds of commissions. The President of the United States could not fire these individuals if Congress said they could not be fired absent cause. So essentially, the Congress decided they were going to go out and effectively amend the U.S. Constitution. And because the Supreme Court was run by FDR and all the terrible policies and jurisprudence that followed, this was approved, which meant that all these administrative agencies that became the deep state of unelected bureaucrats, unaccountable to we the people. Because remember the reason why they're unaccountable to we the people. We might vote out a Democrat and vote in a Republican president. We might vote out a Republican president and vote in a Democratic president. We might vote in a Republican Congress or a Democratic Congress or a Libertarian Congress. It doesn't matter. From the point of view of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt types, the New Dealers, the progressives, the deep staters, they don't care who we, the people, the peons, vote for. As long as they get to keep their unelected bureaucratic jobs, they're going to keep running the EPA. They're going to keep running the FTC. They're going to keep running the FDA. They're going to keep running the DOJ and the ATF. The tens of thousands and millions of these people, these unelected bureaucrats, are going to keep running the government no matter who we vote for or who we vote out. And that has been the case up until just now. But what we're starting to see is really a counter-revolution of Donald Trump is saying, no can do. I'm going to fire these unelected bureaucrats. I'm going to get rid of the deep state to the extent I can, as best as he can. And now it turns out the United States Supreme Court is like, yeah, of course. We can read Article 2 of the Constitution that says the president is fully vested. All the authorities of the president are vested in one man, the president. And we understand that Congress cannot amend the Constitution by saying the president of the United States cannot fire someone from some commission we, Congress, created because we say he can't. Because that allows Congress to invade the province of the presidency. And just like the president cannot invade the province of the courts and cannot invade the province of the Congress, Congress cannot invade the authority of the president. It works both ways. That's how separation of powers works. So it looks like this Humphreys executive holding that says that if you're dealing with a multi-member commission, a multi-member board, a multi-member set of group, if you will, almost like a fourth branch of government, and Congress says you can't fire them without for cause, Humphreys' executor says that the president can't fire these people. The Supreme Court seems pretty clear they're going to get rid of this Humphreys executive precedent. And this is great because the power, it will be taken away from unelected bureaucrats once again and given it back to the elected representatives, which is effectively giving it back to we the people. Taking it away from these unelected bureaucrats and giving it back to the political process is what we want, is what we generally want. And Donald Trump is taking back this authority that has been stolen from we the people since the 1930s. And it seems as if, based on this decision today by Chief Justice John Roberts, that is staying the lower court decision that says because Rebecca Slaughter was not fired by Donald Trump for cause, she gets her job back. And essentially what this order, which doesn't have a rationale, but it's pretty clear what's going on here, Chief Justice John Roberts is essentially indicating that the president is indeed the head of the executive branch. And if he fires your dupa and kicks you out the door, as a general matter, if you're a principal officer of the United States, you get to go bye-bye. You have to go bye-bye. You don't have a right to a job for the federal government. And if the president that you're working for kicks you out the door, that's no different than an employer kicking your butt out the door and firing you for whatever the reason is. It's no different than an employer-employee relationship. The president to the rest of these deep state unelected bureaucrats. And they're very upset about this because remember, for many, many decades, these unelected bureaucrats got to run the government and it did not matter which political party was in power. They were like a fourth branch of government. Beyond the Congress, beyond the president, beyond the courts. They were there no matter who won the election. And they got to make these major decisions no matter who won the election. Well, my friends, that is changing. It's changing in real time. And we should be glad that it is. Because this is restoring the constitutional form of government back to we the people and back to our elected representatives and taking away a whole lot of authority and resources from these nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Almost all of whom, by the way, are basically left-wingers that like big government, lots of regulations, no capitalism, and the like. So we want to take away their power. This is very good for America. It's very good for our freedoms. And yes, it's very good for our right to keep and bear arms. because a big government is no friend to our liberties and our freedoms, including to, among other things, the right to free speech and the right to bear arms, as for the reasons I'm sure we've talked about before. So there you have it, folks. Another big win by Donald Trump in the U.S. Supreme Court over this deep state argument. And we'll continue to track these sorts of things because there's a lot of breaking news at the Supreme Court every day now. So we'll keep you informed. And again, thank you for tuning in here. Make sure you follow me over there on X at 4 Boxes Diner. And I look forward to talking to you again real soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.